What's up? You checking out the Frequent Flyer, and this is the Zing 110. So we're gonna talk about this real quick. Now the Zing 110 is a direct clone, it looks like, of the King Kong 110 GT. Check them out here. Same canopies and everything. Almost the same frame, but the frame is a little different, and it has different cutouts in the frame. And the King Kong 110 GT has an irregular spacing here for the mounting of the flight controller here, whereas this one has a more traditional 20 by 20 stack configuration. And so in general, what they did here is they actually took the King Kong 110 GT and tried to make improvements on it, but at the same time they did do some things where they made it less compelling as the 110 GT. And so for starters, I think its best assets are these motors here. These motors are really nice motors. They're 1105 8500 kV motors, and these motors are awesome, man. They give this thing a lot of thrust, crazy punch out, and also they're very durable. These are the stock motors. I haven't had to replace a motor or anything. I'm really thinking about purchasing these motors. I really like the way these motors perform and all. These motors here, they actually use Baby Hawk motors on this one here, and the motors are actually a lower kV than the Baby Hawk motors. I think these are 4500 kV motors there, so really low kV on the motors. I think that's a little too low for 3S, especially if you're going to use some smaller props like this, and they use the Baby Hawk motors, and so only these props will fit, and a couple of other props that they have specifically for the Baby Hawk. So you can't use larger props, and I think this really needs larger props, especially with this lower kV on the motors. And also the ventilation on the motors aren't as good. So these motors are completely closed in, just about, only a big space on the bottom there. But as far as ventilation on the top, there's no air holes or anything cut out on it. Now everywhere else, I think they actually improved it. So we have an XT30 connector here, and that stack spacing there is a little better, I think, because you can add whatever flight controller you want in there, and ESCs as well. And also they added a better flight controller in here. I think the flight controller does support OSD, but I think they kind of missed the mark there because they didn't use Betaflight OSD. It has a Flycolor OSD, and so you can't really configure it in Betaflight. So that's one downside to it. And so I got mixed feelings about this thing. It has potential to be great, but those little shortcomings there, I think that might be enough for me to say that I still really like the 110 GT over it. But with some mods, this thing can be great, mainly the motors. I think if this thing had the 110 GT's motors on it, then that would knock it out of the park just about. All it would be missing is a better OSD, but I think that's really not important because this does have a spot where you can put a buzzer, so you can add a buzzer to this. So it's a few things that make it better than the there's a few things that make it potentially better than the 110 GT, but it has a few things that hold it back. But it's actually a really nice flyer though. It does fly nice and all. It just doesn't have as much power as the 110 GT. The 110 GT is known for that wowing power that it had. I think it introduced that size of prop that it has on it, the 2.8 size there. I think the 110 GT was the first to come out with that, and it might have been the full speed Leader 120, but I had this before I got the Leader 120, so I credit the King Kong 110 GT for starting this trend of these 2.8 45 pitch props here. And so yeah, you can't utilize those on here. So what I plan to do definitely is to get some better motors for this, but I'm really debating on, should I use some other motor or should I just get the King Kong 110 GT motors and put some of those on here. I think that might be what I'm going to do. But anyhow, really nice model, really nice successor to the King Kong 110 GT, even though this is not King Kong. As you can see, I did knock off my little part. I did knock off my little part there for the antenna, and I think that might have affected the antenna's reception. And I wonder why they didn't go with the newer King Kong VTXs there that are switchable to 125 milliwatts. That would have been better for sure. But anyhow, not a bad model at all. The Zing 110. Thanks for watching.